My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I never thought I'd have to defend my own home against the very people who once claimed to love me. But betrayal changes everything. This is my story. The clinking of silverware on my mother's best china was the only sound for a moment. It was our annual family dinner held at my parents' house. This year it was supposed to be a celebration for my older brother Ethan. He had apparently closed a big real estate deal, and my parents were bursting with pride. I sat quietly, sipping my water, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. I've been to enough of these celebrations for Ethan to know they were never really about him. They were about reminding me of my place. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far this story travels. The air was thick with the smell of roasted chicken and my mother's forced cheerfulness. She kept glancing at Ethan with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Then her gaze would flick to me, and the smile would vanish. My father just stared at his plate, a silent partner in whatever drama was about to unfold. Halfway through the meal, Ethan pushed his chair back with a loud scrape. He stood up holding a champagne glass. The cheap, bubbly liquid sloshed near the rim. "A toast," he announced, his voice booming in the small dining room. Everyone stopped eating. My aunts and uncles turned to him, their faces eager. They loved the theater of it all. "To family," he started, raising his glass, "and to success. As you all know, I've been doing well, very well." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. His eyes found mine across the table, and a smug, cruel smile spread across his face. "So well, in fact, that I'm finally ready to move into my new property, a place I've had my eye on for a long time." He took a dramatic sip of champagne. My cousin, Mark, leaned forward. "Which place is that, Ethan?" Ethan's smile widened. He pointed the stem of his glass directly at me. "The house Lauren is living in," he said, his voice loud and clear. "It's mine." A collective gasp went through the room. It was sharp and sudden, like a string snapping. Every single head turned to look at me. I could feel their eyes on me, judging, questioning. Whispers erupted around the table. "His house? All this time?" I heard my Aunt Carol murmur to my uncle. "So she was just staying there?" Another voice said, laced with pity and a little bit of satisfaction. "Like a guest in her own home." Each word was a small, sharp stone thrown at me. I sat perfectly still, my hands clenched into fists in my lap. My stomach felt like it had dropped to the floor. I wasn't surprised. Deep down, I knew he would try something like this. Ethan couldn't stand to see me have anything that he didn't. But I never imagined he would do it like this, in front of everyone, turning my life into a public spectacle. I looked at my mother. She was watching me, her expression cold and unreadable. There was no defense in her eyes, no anger on my behalf. There was just nothing. And that hurt more than anything Ethan could ever say. I was frozen, trapped in a spotlight of shame that my own brother had built just for me. Growing up, my world was divided into two sections, Ethan's and mine. His section was bright, loud, and full of praise. Mine was quiet in the shadows. He was the golden boy, the one who was going to do great things. I was just Lauren, the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who was expected to not cause any trouble. When Ethan got an A on a paper, it was framed and put on the fridge. When I got straight A's for an entire year, my dad would nod and say, "Good job, keep it up." When Ethan wanted a new car for his 16th birthday, my parents refinanced their house to get him a shiny red convertible. He drove it everywhere, showing it off to his friends, a symbol of how much he was loved. When I turned 16, I got a bus pass and a lecture about the importance of saving money. That was the pattern of our lives. They poured everything into him: money, attention, dreams. He went to a private university out of state, his tuition paid in full. He spent his summers backpacking through Europe on my parents' dime. I stayed home. I went to a community college for 2 years to save money, then transferred to the state university. I worked 2 jobs to pay for it. One was at a greasy spoon diner, serving coffee and pancakes to tired truck drivers at 6 in the morning. The other was at the university library, shelving books in the dead quiet of the night. I remember nights I was so tired my bones ached. I'd come home smelling of old paper and fried bacon, and I'd see Ethan on the couch watching TV, complaining about how hard his advanced philosophy class was. He never once asked me about my day. The house I lived in now, the one he was claiming in front of everyone, had been my grandparents' home. After they passed, it went to my parents. For years, they used it as a rental property. But when Ethan graduated with a mountain of debt from his expensive lifestyle, they talked about selling it. "We'll sell Grandma's house, and that should clear most of your student loans," my dad had said to him one night at dinner. Ethan had just laughed. "Don't sell it. I'll take it. One day, I'll live there. It'll be my inheritance." He said it like it was a fact, like the world owed it to him. My parents just smiled. No one looked at me. No one asked me what I thought. I just sat there, eating my meal in silence, feeling invisible. But I wasn't just sitting there. I was planning. I was saving. Every extra dollar from my tips at the diner, every cent from my paycheck at the library, I put it away. I lived on instant noodles and cheap bread. I wore clothes from thrift stores. While Ethan was burning through money, I was quietly building a future he couldn't even imagine, a future he was now trying to steal. Back at the dinner table, Ethan was in his element. He loved being the center of attention, especially when it came at my expense. "I know this might be a shock to some of you," he said, trying to sound humble, but failing miserably. "We kept it quiet to give Lauren a place to stay, to help her out. But the arrangement has gone on long enough." He made it sound like I was a charity case, like I was some poor, helpless thing he and my parents had graciously taken in. The truth was, I hadn't asked them for a single dollar since I turned 18. He doubled down, his voice getting stronger. "She doesn't pay rent, she just squats there. It was a favor, and now the favor is over." My uncle, a man who always believed whatever he was told, nodded seriously. "So the house is in your name, Ethan?" "Of course," Ethan said with a confident scoff. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He waved it in the air like a flag of victory. "I have the proof right here." He unfolded it and slapped it on the table. It was a photocopy of a deed. I recognized it immediately. It was the original deed from 15 years ago, when the house was officially transferred into my parents' names after my grandmother passed away. It listed their names, clear as day, David and Sarah Mitchell. "See?" Ethan said, pointing a finger at their names. "It's the family home. And as the son, it comes to me, it's always been understood." The relatives leaned in to look, nodding as if this piece of outdated paper was undeniable proof. Some of them shot me sympathetic glances, the kind you give to someone who has just been publicly exposed. A few of the others, like my Aunt Carol, were practically smirking. They had always been jealous of the little independence I had managed to build for myself. Seeing me taken down a peg was the best entertainment they'd had all year. I looked at my parents. My father was studying the wood grain of the table, refusing to look at anyone. My mother was watching Ethan with a look of pure adoration. She was proud of him, proud of his cruelty, proud of the way he could lie with such confidence. In that moment, I realized the betrayal wasn't just Ethan's. It was theirs too. They had let him do this. They had probably helped him plan it. They were all in on the same ugly lie. And I was the only one who was supposed to be hurt by it. My hands started to tremble under the table. I pressed them into my legs, trying to make them stop. A cold wave washed over me, the kind that comes with deep shock and even deeper pain. It wasn't just about the house. It was about every sacrifice I had ever made being erased in front of my entire family. My mind flashed back to all those nights. The exhaustion was a physical weight on my shoulders. I remembered falling asleep on the bus on the way home from the library, my head knocking against the cold glass of the window. I remembered counting my tips at the diner, my fingers greasy and sore, calculating if I could afford to buy a new textbook or if I'd have to use the library's copy again. I remembered the loneliness of studying on a Saturday night while other people my age were out having fun, the silence of my small apartment broken only by the sound of pages turning. Every dollar I saved was a tiny piece of my freedom. Every overtime shift I worked was a brick in the foundation of the life I was trying to build for myself, a life away from their judgment and their expectations, a life where I wasn't just Ethan's sister. And now, with a few arrogant words and a worthless piece of paper, he was trying to tear it all down. He was trying to take credit for my struggle, for my sleepless nights, for my sacrifice. I looked up and met my mother's eyes again. The coldness in her stare was what broke me. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad, it was just empty. It was the look of someone who had already written you off. It was a look that said, "This is how it should be. He deserves it more than you do." That glance stung worse than all of Ethan's lies. It was a confirmation of what I had suspected my whole life. In their eyes, I would never be enough. My hard work meant nothing. My achievements were invisible. I was just a placeholder until their real child, their son, was ready to claim what was his. A lump formed in my throat. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room was suffocating. "Excuse me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked calmly out of the dining room and toward the small downstairs bathroom, my head held high. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and sharp, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in their house. They had underestimated me my entire life. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. They had no idea what I was made of. I closed the bathroom door behind me, the click of the lock echoing in the small, tiled room. I leaned against it, taking a deep, shuddering breath. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with a mixture of hurt and anger. For a second, I let myself feel the full force of their betrayal. It felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. But then, another feeling started to rise up from the pit of my stomach. It was a cold, hard resolve. They thought they had me trapped. They thought they had won. But Ethan, in his arrogance, had made a critical mistake. He had assumed I was the same quiet, passive girl who never fought back. He had no idea I had seen this coming. I had been anticipating a stunt like this for months. I knew Ethan was getting desperate. I'd heard whispers from cousins that he was drowning in credit card debt and had lost a lot of money on a bad investment. He needed a lifeline, and he thought my house was it. He thought he could bully me into giving it up, or at least shame me in front of the family so they would pressure me. But I was prepared. Hours before I left for the dinner, I had stood in my own bedroom, in my own quiet house. I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, the one where I keep my important documents. I pulled out a thick, manila folder. Inside were the papers that represented years of my life, years of my hard work. I tucked the folder safely into my handbag, the same handbag that was now sitting on the floor next to the bathroom sink. I reached down and opened it. My fingers brushed past my wallet and my keys until they found the cool, crisp edges of the folder. I pulled it out and opened it on the small bathroom counter. The truth was, my parents hadn't just let me live in my grandparents' old house. 2 years ago, they were the ones in financial trouble. The bank was threatening to foreclose on it because they had taken out a second mortgage they couldn't afford, to fund one of Ethan's failed business ideas, of course. They came to me in secret, humiliated and desperate. They asked me for a loan. I told them I could do better. I offered to buy the house from them outright. I used every penny of my savings, the money I had been carefully accumulating since I was 16 years old. It was a fair market price. I didn't cheat them. I hired a lawyer and we did everything by the book. It was a clean, legal sale. Not only did I have the bill of sale and the canceled checks, but I had the most important document of all, the updated official deed from the county clerk's office, and on that deed there was only one name listed under owner, Lauren Mitchell. Ethan's arrogance, his need for a public spectacle, had given me the perfect stage. He wanted to humiliate me. Instead, he had just handed me the microphone. I took one last look in the mirror. The hurt was still there, but now it was surrounded by a quiet, unshakable strength. I smoothed down my shirt, picked up my handbag, and unlocked the door. It was time to finish dinner. I walked back into the dining room. The whispering stopped the moment they saw me. Everyone stared, expecting tears, expecting me to run out the front door in shame. Ethan was leaning back in his chair, a triumphant smirk on his face. He looked like a king holding court. I walked slowly back to my seat and sat down. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my fork and took a bite of my now cold mashed potatoes. The silence was heavy and awkward. Finally, Ethan couldn't stand it anymore. He let out a short, condescending laugh. "Well, this is awkward. Look, Lauren, there's no need to be upset. You can stay for a few more weeks while you find a new place. I'm not a monster." I finished chewing my bite of potatoes, swallowed, and then looked directly at him. My voice when I spoke was perfectly calm and steady. It didn't waver. "Ethan," I said, my tone even, "are you absolutely sure that house belongs to you?" He scoffed. "I just showed everyone the deed. It's our parents' house. It's the family legacy. It's mine." "Is it?" I asked softly. I reached down and picked up my handbag, placing it on the table in front of me. I unzipped it and pulled out the manila folder. The room went silent again. Every eye was on that folder. "You're right," I said, looking at him. "You showed them a deed. An old one. A copy." I opened my folder and took out the documents inside. They were crisp and official, not a flimsy photocopy. I, on the other hand, have the original updated land title. And the official deed, filed with and certified by the county clerk's office 2 years ago. I laid the papers on the table. The most important one was on top. It had a notarized stamp on the bottom corner, bright and official. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get emotional. I just let the truth sit there on the polished wood of the dining table. Then, I gave the papers a gentle push, sending them sliding across the table until they stopped right in the middle, in front of everyone. "Go ahead," I said, my eyes never leaving Ethan's. "Read it." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. They just stared at the thick, official-looking document sitting in the center of the table. Ethan's smug expression had vanished. His face was a mask of confusion and disbelief. My uncle, Dave, was the first to break the trance. He was a practical man, a carpenter who believed in things he could see and touch. He leaned forward, squinting at the paper on top. He slowly reached out a hand and pulled the document closer. The entire family leaned in with him, their eyes following his finger as he scanned the page. He cleared his throat. "It says here," he began, his voice hesitant. He read the legal jargon slowly, then he got to the most important part. His voice became loud and clear in the silent room. "Owner, Lauren Mitchell." He looked up from the paper, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at me, then at Ethan, then back at the paper as if he couldn't believe what he had just read. A wave of color drained from Ethan's face. He went from tan to a sickly pale white in a matter of seconds. "What? That's not possible. It's fake. You faked it," he stammered, his voice suddenly high-pitched and weak. "It's not fake, Ethan," I said calmly. "Look at the bottom. That's a notarized stamp. That's the official seal from the county clerk's office. That's my name, my signature, and my parents' signatures from when I bought the property from them 2 years ago." The whispers started again, but this time, their tone was completely different. It wasn't mockery or pity aimed at me. It was shock and embarrassment. "She bought it?" I heard my cousin whisper. "So Ethan was lying the whole time?" Aunt Carol, who had been smirking at me just a few minutes earlier, now refused to meet my eyes. She stared intently at her plate, her face bright red. The relatives who had nodded along with Ethan's story now sat wide-eyed and ashamed. They had been so quick to believe the worst of me, so eager to see me fail. And now, the truth was laid bare on the table, and it made them all look like fools. The public humiliation Ethan had planned for me had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Ethan shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "This is ridiculous. Mom, Dad, tell them. You promised me the house. You always said it would be mine," he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. He looked at our parents, pleading with them to back him up. My mother stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no words came out. My father finally looked up from his plate, his face etched with shame. He couldn't look at me. He could only look at his son. "Ethan," my father started, his voice a weak mumble. But I cut him off. I had been silent for too long. It was my turn to speak. "A promise means nothing without a legal document, Ethan," I said, my voice cutting through his tantrum. It was still calm, but it was as hard as steel. "And a promise doesn't pay the bills. I bought this house from Mom and Dad when the bank was about to take it from them. I paid every single cent myself with money I earned from working 2 jobs while you were racking up credit card debt on fancy dinners and vacations you couldn't afford." Every word was true, and every word hit him like a punch. "They were going to lose it because of the money they gave you for that business venture that disappeared into thin air," I continued, not letting up. "I saved this family's home. The only reason you had a stage for this pathetic little drama tonight is because I made sure it was still here." The truth, all of it, was finally out in the open. The room was silent, the family frozen in place, witnessing his complete and utter unraveling. Ethan's face twisted in rage. He had no lies left, No arguments. No way to spin this. He was exposed, and he couldn't stand it. With a guttural roar of frustration, he slammed his fist on the dining table. The plates and glasses jumped. Then, without another word, he turned, stormed out of the room, and a moment later we heard the front door slam shut. He was gone, leaving nothing but a trail of disgrace and a stunned silence behind him. I didn't wait for the apologies. I didn't need them. I knew they would be hollow, offered only because I had proven them wrong, not because they were truly sorry for how they had treated me. I calmly stood up and began to gather my papers. My hands were perfectly steady now. I placed the deed and the other documents back into the manila folder. My mother started to say my name, her voice trembling. Lauren, I didn't even look at her. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I'm leaving, I said simply. I zipped my folder into my handbag, picked it up, and walked out of the dining room. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, the same one Ethan had just slammed, and closed it gently behind me. The night air was cool and crisp. I got into my car and drove home. As I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark and quiet, waiting for me. I walked up the porch steps, the wood solid under my feet. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. It smelled like me. It smelled like home. It was my home. I didn't turn on the television or play any music. Instead, I walked through the quiet rooms, my fingers trailing along the walls. My walls. I went to the kitchen and lit a small, lavender-scented candle. I carried it out to the back porch and sat down in my favorite chair. The moon was bright, and the only sound was the gentle chirping of crickets. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, in and out. I breathed in the cool night air and breathed out years of pain, years of feeling invisible, years of being second best. For the first time in my life, the crushing weight I had always carried on my shoulders was gone. It had lifted. The knot in my stomach was gone. I didn't feel anger or even triumph. I just felt peace. A deep, quiet, unshakable peace. They had tried to take this from me. They had tried to take my home, my work, my dignity, but they couldn't touch it. Because I hadn't just bought a house. I had built a life. I had earned my own respect. And that was something no one could ever take away from me. Sitting there in the silence of my own backyard, under the stars, I finally felt free. I owned more than just a piece of property. I owned myself. They tried to strip me of my home, my dignity, my peace. They thought that because I was quiet, I was weak. They thought that because I worked in silence, my work didn't count. But the truth was always mine. I was the one who held the papers. I was the one who put in the hours. Don't ever let anyone take credit for what you built in silence. Don't ever let their noise drown out your truth. Your hard work is real, your sacrifices are valid, and you owe no one an apology for the life you have earned for yourself. If this story touched you, like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from.